Yo, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Abundant Journey podcast. It has been a while, but we are so happy to be hanging out with you guys today. And when I say it's been a while, we've not done an episode with just you and I, Nick. So how are you?
Man, I'm good. It brings me like endless joy that you just introduced the podcast with yo. That really takes me back. I don't know where that came from. Usually, I suppose we're recording at like at least 12, 14 hours earlier in the day. It's
for
usually
sure
7 a.m., which is not a yo time of the day. But, here we are, Abundant Journey after dark.
That's right.
And, the true DJ Nick James comes out. So I'm grateful, man. But truly, so glad to be able to chat with you. And in this episode, we have picked up many new followers. I don't know exactly how many, but we've got several over the course of the past year. Our listenership has grown, which we are so grateful for.
100%.
That's wonderfully exciting, and it ought to, right? Because we've had some amazing guests on, and so I'm so glad that their story is going out. But in recognition of us having a handful of new, or more than a handful of new listeners, we realize that maybe some of you have questions of like, what is an abundant journey? What are these guys all about? What are we trying to build here? Mm-hmm. And so in this episode, we really wanted to get to the heart of what is abundant journey. What are we trying to do? What makes us different from any other entrepreneurial investing podcast that people could listen to or engage with. And man, since this was like your original dream, a brainchild, birthed of your own heart, I'd love for you to for somebody who hasn't really heard the story of this idea of abundant journey, where did it come from?
No, I love that. And, I think if you can go back on the website to episode 1, we may have titled it, What is Abundant Journey? So it's going to be really interesting to listen back on that one and see if the vision has changed at all.
And I wouldn't recommend that our listeners go back and listen to episode 1. Hopefully we're a lot better now than we were.
Oh, man. I probably still do a lot of ums or interruptions.
There wasn't a yo. I'll tell you that much.
Definitely true. There was no yo-yo-yos. So, the beauty of this journey for us, and I've shared on past episodes, like my journey in the banking world really was this eye-opening experience because I was a homeschooled kid. Then I went to Bible college, loved all of the above, but then I jumped into business and I had no idea how business worked. And for me, there was this moment when I was sitting across the table from really successful business owners, entrepreneurs, investors, and these people had learned to play the game different than the rest of the population. And what I mean by that is they weren't hanging out on a 9-to-5 job, but they were building assets, they were building wealth, they were making a difference, they had control over their time, freedom over their time. And so really it set me on this learning trajectory for multiple years of asking questions. And so I think what ended up happening with this podcast is that there was some significant conversations with a handful of those business owners, and we've talked about them in the past, but there was a handful of those conversations that were really impactful. But I think what I recognized was everybody's got a story to tell, especially people who were willing to not go with that status quo of culture, of workforce, of expectations, and the labels that get put on us as people.
Yeah.
The people that I was getting to talk to really blew up those labels and said, I'm going to do this my way. And I think this podcast really started from a desire to hear those people's stories and help inspire others to kind of blaze their own trail. And, maybe I'll pause in a second, but I think one thing that's been really fun about our podcast and unique is that there's so many out there, but we aren't linear focused on multifamily real estate
Right.
or being the boss of a business. We are very broad. And I think a lot of times that doesn't serve podcasts very well because you need to know your audience. But really, our audience is people who want to be inspired to make a better life for themselves, to make a better life for their families, to take their talents and gifts, which are unique to them, and start blazing their trail. And so within that, I love the fact that we have such a huge range of guests.
Totally. Yeah. The analogy that came to mind as you're talking is just that, like in the banking world, you had this epiphany of like, hey, in my 9 to 5, like I've been playing this game of checkers and everybody around me has been playing checkers. But as I'm meeting with these business owners, like they're playing a different game. They're playing chess.
Totally.
And I want to learn what are the rules to that game. And every single one of them, like every chess game is different. Everybody's got different moves that they play, which is part of the beauty of that game. But to your point of like, that's what unites all the guests that we've had on the show. It's not that they're all using the same strategies or making the same kind of moves, but they're all playing the game of chess as opposed to the game of checkers.
Yeah.
And for both you and I think at the start of the podcast and Abundant Journey, it was kind of like, man, we want to play chess too. Like that looks like a much more enjoyable, much more satisfying game. Like I'm kind of bored of checkers. And so let's learn the rules and learn some different strategies from people who seem like they're playing it really well.
Yep.
And that has been a ton of fun. To be able to have so many different people on. But now, as much as my chess checkers analogy may be helpful in saying that there's two different kinds of games, even when you're talking about like the game of chess, there are some people who play just ruthlessly to win, and then there are others who are, for lack of a better term, friendlier players. Yeah. This analogy is breaking down very quickly. Where I'm trying to go with this, though, is that it's like, okay, entrepreneurship in and of itself is not the only thing that Abundant Journey is concerned with. There's this idea of abundance. Yep. And so I'd love for you to speak to that, like what abundance means to you, what it means in the context of Abundant Journey, or even examples of where you've seen that in the lives of our guests.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I liked the analogy because to your point, in the workforce with business owners, there are so many different ways to play that game. And people do it well and at all different levels. And from the fundamental, like, I want to be a small business owner and I want to be self-employed because I want to be my own boss, all the way up to guys who are running multi-billion-dollar a year companies, which we've sat in the room with.
Right.
And there's so many different games. And so this concept of abundance, I think, can be very vague.
Sure.
It can be very undefined, but I think for us, where we've kind of planted our flag is there seems to be these two schools of thought. There's a scarcity mindset, and the people who play the game with a scarcity mindset orient their business, their actions, their activities around this belief of, I have to get as big a piece of the pie as I can, because if I don't get it, somebody else is going to get it.
Right.
And so I need to do whatever it takes to protect myself, protect my business, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but this mindset of kind of dog eat dog world. Mm-hmm. And then I think on the flip side, I would almost deem the enlightened folks, and those are the ones who I would hope that we would agree on, that we've had on the podcast, is that there's this abundance mindset, that there's no shortage of opportunities, there's no shortage of dollars, there's no shortage of deals, there's no shortage of relationships, there's no shortage of what you're trying to accomplish and the impact or the dent you're trying to make in this life, through your life, there's so many opportunities. And I think we really gravitate towards those sort of people. One, I think they're just more fun to be around. And two, you want to be in the game with those people. Right. I remember one of the things that my dad often said in business, well, he still does, but he says is, play the game with people you like to play with and who want to win the way you want to win. And so I think we've really tried to gravitate to those people because for us, what's bigger than trying to get as big a piece of the pie or fill the bank account is this truly abundant life. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll probably unpack how that's more multifaceted than just the dollars in the bank account. But I think that just stems back to the conversation. One of the impactful conversations that we had was, man, instead of looking at life through this lens of I need to get a big old piece of the pie, be a pie maker.
Yeah.
Be somebody who will produce more pies to give to others. So that's, I think, really kind of where that abundance mindset started for us.
Yeah. And I remember early on as you were telling me about that vision, that abundance mindset piece resonated so profoundly with me that it was like, yeah, I definitely want to jump on and get into the network of people that have that sort of mentality towards life, of that there is more than enough to go around, and when there isn't, well, that just means that there's both a need and an opportunity to create more.
Yep.
And so I love that. And I think there's another aspect to abundance that perhaps we haven't delved into explicitly, whether on the website or in our podcasts. But I just think of abundance also in the context of like human flourishing, and that there are ways of doing business and entrepreneurship and investing that are exploitive, expletive. That's a hard word, but where you're exploiting others, right?
Yeah.
You're taking advantage of people, and that generally is accompanied with a sort of scarcity mindset. But that with an abundance mindset, you're really seeking the flourishing of all people.
Yeah.
There's certainly a flourishing for yourself. There's a flourishing for your family, but there's also a flourishing that you're creating in the communities around you. And that's been one of the awesome things in talking with so many of the business owners that we've had on, is that they realize that, yeah, they created the business, but it's now so much more than just something that they own. Like they've got, several families that now are part of this business and are being blessed by the profits and the income that it's producing, and they're part of creating those things. Or I think of like the sitting down with Joel Anderson in the episode about profits with a purpose, and the way that they've got a company doing over $1 billion a year. And while that's cool, like the thing that Joel just couldn't stop going on about is all of the good that has enabled them to do when it comes to building schools and providing for those that are going without food or without education or without the basic necessities of life, being able to meet a lot of those needs. So I think that abundance and human flourishing go hand in hand.
I don't disagree with you. I think that we've continued to see that from our guests, and it's been great to experience that even in the business world. I think about some conversations I have with business owners who have third and fourth generation family members working for them.
Yeah.
And it's just like
so cool.
They've consistently been a part of something bigger. And I think, as humankind, we want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to know that our work is meaningful.
Yeah.
We want to know we're making a difference. And, I think as you were talking, one of the easy examples that comes to mind for me is the mobile home park game. We've had some great conversations with people in the mobile home park investor space, and they rightfully so get angry at the mobile home park investors who buy properties and jack up rents really high, and they have to or they don't have to, but they evict tenants, and people are then either out of homes or they don't have places to go, and maybe that's all that they can afford. We understand that there's a business side to this game,
Right.
but there's a way to play this game, that one specifically with mobile home park investing, to where you recognize you are creating a massive benefit to people in low income, low affordable housing. And we know as a country, that's a crisis right now.
Right.
And so what an opportunity to step into that space, make a difference in people's lives, and serve your homeowners and your tenants in those parks, instead of trying to bleed them dry from every last penny that they have.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's we end each episode with that question of like, how do you want to be remembered? And we've had, so many great responses to that. But part of why we end the episode that way is because using the mobile home parks and using like a Corey Harrelson in particular with that, I just couldn't imagine getting to the end of the episode and anyone being like, well, the way I hope that I'm remembered is for, sucking the earth dry of all of its resources and, evicting the poorest of poor so that I could make a few extra bucks. Fortunately, that has not been the answer
That's right.
we've gotten
That's
from
right.
many of our guests. If that is the answer we get, we probably won't air that episode.
Yeah,
They might not fit the abundant journey type. But that it gets to the heart of exactly what you're saying, of that it's more than just total profits, but it's what kind of good you're able to create in the world, and recognizing, as you said earlier, that everybody's wired a bit differently. Everybody has different gifts, different interests, different talents. And so with Abundant Journey, we want to both inspire and, as best as possible, equip people to take hold of those things, like that your talents and your interests and passions are not accidental, but they exist for the common good of the world around you.
Yeah.
And that's not just good for them, but also, as we've seen in the lives of our guests, has very material benefits for you as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've really tried to set this up, both Abundant Journey and the podcast, as the antithesis of a lot of the voices out there in the social media space, the ultra uber successful people. And you and I mean, we like vacations, we like finer things in life, but there's so much noise around. Do you want to own a jet? Do you want to be running $1 billion empire? Do you want to be able to go do XYZ? And, I think one thing we've loved so much with our guests is how they understand the wealth they've built, and some of them have built tremendous wealth.
Right.
Their goals are not that. Their goals are to make a difference. And so I think we really pride ourselves on this, really embracing kind of the anti voice of the common social media of success at all cost, and no matter what it takes, crush everybody, sacrifice everything else in your life to get that thing. Because as we have experienced and had conversations with people, there's plenty of people who reach that level and are miserable, and they reach those levels of success and say, holy cow, I missed it. I missed the journey.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And it gets back to just what metrics you use to measure abundance or to measure success. And so many of the, I think of like the Grant Cardone and the 10X, and, as much as some of those principles are good and helpful, I'm not meaning to knock anyone in particular, but I like you, I've got a wife and 3 kids, and it's like, well, to 10X my business is also going to require like 10X the amount of my attention and 10x the amount of my energy and concern that's going into my business. And as much as, I'd like to be made of, like infinite capacity and ability, I'm just not. And so like, while I might be able to 10x my wealth or my success, like I can't 10x my time or my ability to be present with my wife and my kids. And just, it's been refreshing, the number of guests that we've had on that have had limits on how much they're willing to put into their work, because they recognize that life is more than just dollars in a bank account, or life is more than a certain number of social media followers. Like they've had a very well-rounded sort of metric for abundance. And we've actually talked about, what we have with Abundant Journey is these 5 F's that are kind of 5 metrics by which we measure a life of abundance. And we mention them in every podcast episode in that golden nugget round. But again, I think of listeners that are maybe less familiar with the show. And so I'd love for you to, explain, all right, what are those 5 F's and why are those, these aren't like the infallible 5 metrics. They're not the only ones that you can use, but why, why have we chosen these 5 metrics that we always ask our guests about?
Well, before I dive in and ask or bring up the 5 F's, since I do it every episode, I would just really step back real quick to your word you were just saying. And I think, as people get to hear the questions we ask, as they get to know what we're working on, as they get to know what our guests are doing, make no mistake, like our guests are grinding and they're working hard. And there's seasons of that. And there's a recognition, but there's also a recognition of, and I love how you put that, there's just more to life than that. And I think that in our hustle culture, in our social media voices, that's what sells and that's what sounds really good. And those people are driving the fancy cars or are going on the fancy vacations. And so within that, it's really easy to put up this facade and this visualization of the grand life and the good life. And again, with us bucking against that, we'll come back full circle now to the 5 F's. And I think what it is that you and I have looked on and we've said, all right, well, what does the good life actually mean? And what does it look like? Beautifully, it's different for many of our guests. And so we're not trying to impose that on anybody specifically, but I think we've tried to give some pillars and some framework that I think we all universally can agree on. So family is the first on the list, because for most of us, family is essential. We have been placed in the homes and we have spouses, we have kids that we're tending to, and there are significant needs that our family members have that can quickly be neglected, but family is such a pivotal point. And I've experienced in my own life that if things within the family dynamic aren't good, well, nothing else in life is good either. And so that is an essential piece. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and it just gets to the heart of what does it mean to be a human being? Like as humans, we are relational creatures through and through. And one of the saddest pictures is, the person who dies alone. They have everything in the world in terms of material possessions, but they have nobody around them to enjoy it with. And so whatever family looks like for different people, because we know that family can be complicated. We also know that not all of our listeners are married or have kids, but I think, family is kind of that encompassing of the relational,
your people,
your people. Exactly. And the priority on having rich, meaningful relationships with people that you love and who love you, and that being one of the things that makes life so worth living. You cannot have an abundant life without at least a handful of really sincere, meaningful, loving
Yep.
relationships.
Yep. Couldn't say it any better. So I'm moving to the next one. I love it. I love it. Well,
I'll take that.
Yeah, well, and so the next one, faith, and obviously and naturally people fall in different buckets in this, and so we don't ever impose our thoughts on that in the podcast or impose that. But I think the significance and why faith plays such a huge part is most of the time, the people we talk to, there is a faith component for them that they not only credit success, but they credit the purpose behind why they're still going. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we've had any of our guests who have said, oh, no, I'm just hanging out, chilling on the beach. They recognize that there's a stewardship to the success, the money, the employees. There's a responsibility piece. And for them, they say, hey, I'm still going because I have more of an impact I can make on the world. Whether that's their family, whether that's their employees, whether that's the community or the world. I mean, we've talked with guys who are on the forefront of creating new, giant, massive multifamily structures that are self-sustaining. So right. We're all over the place with these kind of people. But I think universally there's a faith component that each of our guests attribute. And I think that's that core belief and that core value that keeps them moving.
Yeah, I mean, what I might add to that is just that with faith, there's a past, present, and future components to it, and so there's a recognition from our guests that what they have received in large part as a gift.
Yeah.
There's a profound gratitude for the opportunities that they have, for the skills they have, the relationships that they've found themselves in. There's a humility in recognizing that it's like, while they've accomplished a lot of amazing things, they didn't do it on their own. And so there's a gratitude. You hit on the stewardship, the present, really, really well. And I think also, speaking to just that there's this hopefulness for the future, or purpose, I think is the word that you used. Yeah. That life is infused with a purpose, that this all actually means something and is leading towards something that's bigger, better, brighter. And certainly within the Christian faith, which you and I share, yep. Is the recognition of that, hey, the earth started as a beautiful garden. That all got destroyed, but now we're moving towards an unbelievably glorious garden city, and we now have the opportunity to help realize that unbelievable place. Yep. And so that faith component of just, all right, our work has purpose that's going to outlive us.
Yeah.
Which is really cool to think about.
It's so cool. And that's what keeps us going, and many of our guests, is that recognition of, we're going to keep this thing moving forward. And and how many times have you heard it when you go on a vacation, or you go to a friend's house and your folks or your parents say, leave it better than when you found it. That classic line.
Exactly.
I think that's simply put, that's what we're in it to do.
Leaving it better than you found it. Yeah.
So next one here we talk often about, and it's a fun one, is fitness. And many of our guests actually love to talk about this one, because I think there's just a reality in our Americanized fast food culture that we get going and we get busy, and it's I would say a majority of us struggle with some level of consistent exercise, consistent healthy eating. But you and I, and again, I think we all know the rules and know the principles, but the impact that taking care of your body has in doing these other things, right. in running businesses, in growing as parents and as entrepreneurs, and whatever you put there. I think this goes back to my Bowflex days, I'm sure, because I would be on the phones with guys and gals who were heavy, heavy overweight. And, the dream they had was, I want to be in shape so that I could roll around with my grandkids and that I'm going to be around for that. And so, you know, I think we don't ever try to get into the realm of being the experts for fitness or health or anything, but I do think it's a recognition of, hey, this is something to continue to work on, because we all universally, I think, have the same goals of, I want to be around for my loved ones. I want to be able to make a difference. I want to be able to do the fun activities that I enjoy. And so that's always a fun category when we bring it up.
100%. And I feel like you're being a little too humble, because I hope I'm not giving away too much, but like, I'm thrilled about the Nick James diet as well as the Nick James workout plan. Like, it just won't surprise me if within a couple of years, like you're known as a fitness influencer.
Oh.
But yeah, I know that for both you and I, we often feel like we're in our before picture phase more than the after phase. But in all seriousness, like to your point, like if the abundant life, if part of abundance is human flourishing, like that there's a physical element to that as well. And it's hard to say that, or anybody is experiencing human flourishing when you feel limited by your physical capacity because you've neglected your health or your fitness. And so it's an easy thing to do, especially when you get busy, especially when you've got other pressing responsibilities. But we just recognize that it's not just about the physique or having the six pack that you can admire as you look into the mirror, but there's a holistic sense to fitness, that when we're well physically, that plays into our mentality, it plays into our spirit, it plays into the way that we just carry ourselves into the world. And so it is a vital piece of abundance. And
no, I think you're right. And again, I hope you listeners, as you hear this, like you gave the disclaimer before, Nick, these are not the only 5, but there's a web here of what abundance looks like. And there is an intertwining of all of these components to true abundance. And so I think we continue to press in and say, hey, abundance isn't just this, or what this influencer says, or what this post says, or what this website says, or what this company is selling. There's so much that goes into abundance. And I think that's why we love the conversations we have. So, right. The last couple ones here, we have finance and future. And I think they play hand in hand, but finance, I think, is so much more than money in the bank account. It does go back to that stewarding term. I think there's a lot of lack of education around money. There's a lot of lack of discipline around how to utilize money. I mean, you and I have been on our own educational journeys on what does it look like to buy assets versus liabilities, and how should you spend your money, and what are ways to make more money. And man, that's the bulk of the podcast, right? Like, we get into people's journeys and they get to share how they've reached levels of success. But that finance question is meant to be more than just the bank account. It's very much so, how do you manage that? Because, man, if that level of, if the finances aren't right, similar to the family piece, if that's not right, that brings a lot of stress, and that can lead to bad decisions, and that can lead to misinformation. And so, I mean, it can spiral. And so I'm sure most of our listeners, just like you and I at times, have felt that tension and that weight. And so, really that finance piece is, I think it's just absolutely intertwined.
Yeah, right. Like you said, it's more than the amount of money that you have in your bank account, but it's not less than that, and yeah, money is one of the number one stressors for individuals and for families. And frankly, if we're honest, it's probably why most of our listeners like got turned on to this in the first place, or even started thinking about entrepreneurship. Full disclaimer, like I didn't start thinking about entrepreneurship because I wanted to get more fit. Like it was, like I want to, make more money and provide better for my family. And the guys and girls that are playing chess, they seem to be doing it a whole lot better than me and the people around me playing checkers. So like, let me see what's up with that different game. But yeah, it's the finance piece is so much more than the material possessions. Like the abundant life and abundant journey is not about keeping up with the Joneses or having all of the flashy stuff to make everybody around you envious. We totally recognize that stuff doesn't last, which then I think leads into that fifth and final F, right? It is future, which we needed 5 Fs, so it couldn't be an L. But I think that the L, if we could have had 4 Fs and an L, it would have been legacy, which is, I think, really what that future piece is getting to, is that, and of course, like you said, these are all intertwined. So this has some echoes of that faith piece, but it's really that you're not going to be here on this earth forever. And so what is it that you're building? What is it that you're leaving behind for the next generation, whether that's your kids or your grandkids? Like what are the stories that your grandkids are hearing about you? And that has been really cool. Like as we've sat down with so many of the guests that we've had on the show, where they're building assets that they get to pass down to their own children. I don't know. What would you add on that future piece?
Well, it's funny, in thinking back, I don't know that any of our guests actually pick that one, because I normally during the episode only make them pick one of the Fs that they're really focused on. But what's funny is the next question is, at the end of your life, what do you hope you're remembered by? So I basically make all of them answer the future question.
Right.
But I
very
think
sneaky of you. I like it.
But I love the legacy piece because, and the way that you said that, because truly, and I think probably the other piece to the future for me has come from a lot of the time and the influence that I've had in my education journey, and what does living intentionally look like? And I think especially in our culture that is obsessed with comfort, obsessed with coasting, I've heard it said, trying to be the best of being mediocre. I think truly living intentionally, there's not as many people who do that anymore. And I think that all of our guests have that common theme of they set out to do something. Now, they maybe didn't land in the place that they thought they would, or they maybe have done things far beyond what they even believed they could. But they definitely said, all right, I'm going to grab the reins. I'm going to live intentionally, and I'm going to start going towards something. And so that future piece, I think we often ask with the intention of, hey, where are you going? What are you doing?
Yeah. And not to belabor this point too much here, but it's, I think, another thing that sets Abundant Journey and what we're building here apart from so much of the other stuff that's out there, is having that intentionality and kind of enduring mindset about what we're building and the work that we're doing. Like, again, I'm picking on Grant Cardone, but that whole 10X mentality, it really is a recipe for burnout for people if they're not careful. And my mind, as you were talking, just went to, I spent a lot of time in college studying church architecture, and whether you go to church or not, I think everybody has driven around your city, and you can pick out the modern mega church, which is usually just like a converted warehouse. But then as you've driven around in your downtown, you've probably seen 100+ year old cathedral. And just reading some of the stories of architecture, especially of some of these old churches in Europe, like you had people that were building these things and they started on it and they worked on it for 40 years and they never even got to see, the finished piece of it. But here it is, still enduring 500, these European ones, 5, 6, some of them 1,000 years later. Whereas, the warehouse building thing is not going to be not going to last or be remembered. And so I think shifting that analogy over to life with Abundant Journey, we see our lives as much more of contributing to that cathedral, the thing that's going to be enduring and beautiful, even if we actually don't have the full longevity to see the final piece. That's what we're aiming for, to run the race, to finish well. And that's, of course, the quintessential guy that comes to mind is just Dave Ederer. And sitting down with him and, just a guy that has had unbelievable success. But as you talk with him about, what's been most meaningful, it's still having his wife and his sons around the table, his kids around the table with him, and the relationships that he enjoys. And anyway, people need to listen to that
episode 50.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The goat. So good. When you think of what your hope for listeners, like or people that are engaging with Abundant Journey, just how would you, like, your elevator pitch to folks for continuing to engage here or share, if it wasn't clear enough from what we shared about the heart behind Abundant Journey, like just succinctly tell me your hope for people that are listening in.
Yeah, and that can change, I think, over time, and I think it will change for us. I think we're in the stage right now where we're just loving having conversations with people who really are like-minded in those things. I mean, we've just spent, 30 minutes talking about the kind of people we want to be around and the kind of people we want to learn from and the kind of people that we believe our audience wants to learn from. And so it's been so encouraging to hear from our guests who have reached out to, or not our guests, sorry, our listeners, to hear from listeners who have reached out to guests, who have taken them up on training, who have jumped on calls and asked them for wisdom and advice and their perspective on new ventures and things they're going to do. And so I think community continues to be a thing you and I talk about, of just, hey, people who are really trying to give to one another, share in the wisdom, experiences, and knowledge of their successes. And I really do think that our listeners play a part in that, in continuing to help send amazing people our way. And it's been fun because I would say probably at this point, maybe half of the guests we've had over the last year have come from my immediate or your immediate network of relationships. The other half have come from word of mouth referrals. Hey, these are the guys you want to have on. These are the folks you want to be talking to. And I love that. Like, that speaks to that generosity of, oh no, this person, you got to hear their story. And we I think, view ourselves as the vehicle of just sharing those stories. And that's all we're trying to be right now.
Yeah. I love that, man. It's so good. And as I think about listeners to this show, we would really love to hear from you and where you're at in your own story and journey. And perhaps that's one of the things, at least at this point in the podcast also, that sets us apart. Joe Rogan may want to hear from you, but Joe Rogan ain't going to reply to you. Let's just be real. But that is something that really is our heart, is to encourage you in your abundance journey. And so if you want to connect with us, please do so. hello@abundantjourney.net. We would be happy, either one of us, to hop on a call, hear what it is that you feel like you want to do, what you can contribute to the world, your ideas, your dreams. We want to encourage you in those things. And that's one of the beautiful things that has happened as we've been building this, is this thriving network of like-minded people that want to help. And so if there's ways that we can help connect you to folks within our network, pretty much no matter what direction you want to go, there's a high likelihood that we're going to have connections with folks that can help get you there. Yeah. But in order for us to bridge that, you got to reach out to us. So that's an open invitation to chat with us and see where it goes.
Totally. No, I love that. And it's, man, this has been a fun episode. We need to do a few more with just you and me. At least I like talking to you.
Hey, again, man, I'll tell you, I feel so flattered this episode that, with all of the kindness that you have shown me and saying that, I said things perfectly. Floating on a cloud right now. We can do this anytime you want if you're gonna be that nice. So no, this is great. We'll definitely need to do more of it. In the meantime, where should people go? What should they do?
Check out abundantjourney.net. You can also listen to any of our episodes on the major podcast platforms. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I'm another episode for another day, but I go by Nick Zalk there, which is the legal last name. James is attributed to my grandpa, who was an entrepreneur, but that's a place for me. Instagram, I do go by Nick James, so I'm kind of all over the place. You're probably going to have to try to find me, but what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can, it's a German mouthful, but on all the social media platforms, it's at Nick Aufenkamp. That's Aufenkamp with an A and an F and a K. You figure out where those go. Or for both of us, you can just look at the show notes. That might be easier. We do have a newsletter that, in the best of times, it's weekly or bi-weekly. In the worst of times, it's about once a month. But we do try to chock that full of value. So do subscribe to that. And then the very best thing that you can do is share this episode with a friend. Share what we're doing with a friend. The next best thing that you can do is in your podcast player of choice, give us a 5 or 10 or however many stars you can give in that rating. Give us some stars. Show us some love that way. And if you really want some extra credit, you can type some nice things into the review box. That does help people find the podcast, hear the amazing stories of the guests that we have on, and hopefully help more and more people along in their path towards an abundant life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we need to do here soon is do some kind of a survey for our listeners, and we can do 1 to 10 on if I should start episodes with yo, 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 or maybe some other introduction, but we can keep playing with that one.
Yeah. People can look for that on the Instagram poll. All right. We'll post it as a story in this next week, and everybody can vote on on best introduction phrases. So yeah, if you got a good one for us, again, hello@abundantjourney.net. All right, that was probably the world's longest landing of podcast plane, but I think we've safely touched down, and looking forward to being back with everybody very soon.
Talk to you soon, folks. Thank you.